dust on the moon had not been touched in millions of years. Hayun stood at the entrance of the ancient facility, her breath forming small clouds inside her helmet. The structure before her was unlike anything she had seen in 15 years of digging through alien ruins. The walls were smooth, almost alive, with patterns that seemed to shift when she looked away. She was 34 years old and had spent her entire career searching for answers about the past. Now standing before this impossible building, she felt like a child again. Her team of 6 researchers stood behind her, their excitement barely contained over the radio channel. The dating results came back, Jiwoo said through the communicator. He was her closest friend and the team's genetic specialist. Hayun, this place is at least 3 million years old. Maybe older. 3 million years. The number made her dizzy. The oldest known civilization in the galaxy was barely 500,000 years old. This facility existed before any of the current galactic species had even evolved. Before humans had learned to walk upright on Earth, the word still hurt. Hayun had never seen humanity's birth world. 200 years ago, a terrible plague had swept across the planet, killing billions. The survivors had abandoned Earth, sealing it away like a tomb. Now humans lived on scattered colony worlds, always remembering a home they could never return to. "Let's go inside," Hayun said, pushing the painful thoughts away. She had work to do. The entrance opened without resistance, as if it had been waiting for them. Inside, the facility was pristine. No dust, no decay. Nothing that suggested millions of years had passed. Soft light came from the walls themselves, growing brighter as the team walked deeper inside. The main chamber was enormous. In the center stood a pillar of crystal that reached from floor to ceiling. Symbols covered every surface, flowing and changing like water. Hayun approached slowly, her scientific training battling with a strange feeling of recognition. She had never seen these symbols before, yet somehow they felt familiar. "Don't touch anything yet," Jiwoo warned. "We need to scan it first." But Hayun was already reaching out. Her gloved hand touched the crystal surface. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The pillar exploded with light. Symbols raced up and down its length faster and faster, until they became a blur of brilliance. Hayun tried to pull away but couldn't move. The light surrounded her, entered her, filled every cell of her body. Information flooded into her mind. Not words, not images, but pure knowledge. She saw the history of the galaxy stretching back through impossible ages. She saw the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth of stars, the dance of planets, and she saw them. The architects. They were tall and elegant with features that seemed almost human. They moved through the galaxy like gods, creating and building, shaping life itself. They had made all of this. The technology, the structures, the careful arrangement of resources that had allowed other species to evolve and thrive. They had seeded the galaxy with possibility. Then came the final message burning into her consciousness with absolute clarity. A designation. A label that made no sense and all the sense in the world. Terra Prime. First Bloodline. Air designation confirmed. The light released her. Hayun collapsed to her knees, gasping. Her team rushed forward, but she waved them back. Her hands were shaking. Her entire body was shaking. "What happened?" Jiwoo demanded, his voice tight with worry. "Your vital signs went crazy." "What did you see?" "It recognized me," Hayun whispered. "It recognized my DNA. Jiwoo, it called me Terra Prime. It called humans the first bloodline." Silence filled the chamber. Every member of the team stared at her. "That's impossible," one of the other researchers said. "Humans aren't special. We're just another species. We only joined the Galactic Union 300 years ago." "I know what I saw," Hayun said, climbing to her feet. "This facility was built by something called the architects, and they made us. They created humanity." Jiwoo was already pulling out his scanner, running it over Hayun, then over himself. His face went pale as he looked at the results. "There are markers," he said slowly. "Genetic markers I've never noticed before. They're in your DNA, Hayun. They're in mine too. Artificial markers. Someone designed them. The implications crashed over them like a wave. Humans weren't a natural species. They had been created, engineered, designed for some purpose by an ancient civilization that had vanished millions of years ago. Everything they thought they knew about their own history was wrong. "We need to document everything," Hayun said, forcing herself to think like a scientist. "We need to copy all the data from this facility. This changes everything." They worked for hours, scanning and recording. The facility seemed happy to share its secrets now that Hayun had activated it. Images appeared in the air, showing the architects working on a blue-green planet. Earth. They were manipulating the genetics of primitive apes, carefully guiding evolution, creating something new. Creating humans, but why? What purpose had they designed humans for? The archive didn't say. Or perhaps Hayun simply hadn't accessed that information yet. It was Jiwoo who noticed the ships first. 3 contacts on the edge of the system approaching fast. Military vessels. Not human. Someone knows we're here, he said. Someone knows what we found. Hayun looked at the crystal pillar still glowing softly. How had word spread so fast? They had maintained communication silence. Unless the facility itself had sent out a signal when she activated it. A signal that had been waiting 3 million years to be triggered. Contact Captain Tae-jin, Hayun ordered. Tell him we need immediate extraction. And tell him to bring weapons. This just became very dangerous. As if in response to her words, alarms began blaring. The approaching ships had been identified. Vorantis Empire, a warrior species that controlled a significant portion of the galaxy. They were not known for peaceful negotiations. Hayun grabbed a data crystal, uploading as much information as she could from the archive. If something happened to her, if they didn't make it off this moon, at least some of the truth would survive. The truth that humanity was not what they seemed. That they had been created by gods. That they were the first bloodline, whatever that meant. And that truth, Hayun realized with growing dread, might be enough to make every species in the galaxy fear them. Captain Tae-jin brought his ship in fast and low. The indomitable spirit was not a large vessel, but it was quick and well-armed. Weapons fire lit up the sky as Vorantis fighters pursued them down to the surface. Tae-jin's crew returned fire with precision, buying precious minutes. Hayun and her team ran across the dusty surface toward the landing zone. Behind them, the ancient facility began to glow brighter, its systems activating in response to the threat. Whatever the architects had built into this place, it didn't like being attacked. Move faster, Bora shouted from the ship's loading ramp. She was Tae-jin's tactical officer, young but frighteningly competent. Her weapon tracked the sky, ready to provide cover fire. We have maybe 2 minutes before the big ships arrive. They made it aboard with seconds to spare. The ramp sealed shut just as the first energy beam scorched the ground where they had been standing. Tae-jin didn't wait for clearance. The ship lifted off hard, throwing everyone against the walls, and shot toward space at maximum acceleration. Behind them, something remarkable happened. The facility's glow intensified until it became a small sun. Then it exploded. Not a destructive explosion, but a pulse of pure energy that washed over the Vorantis ships like a wave. Their systems flickered and died. The ships went dark, drifting helplessly in space. What was that? Tae-jin demanded, staring at the tactical display. Defense mechanism, Hayun said quietly. She was still clutching the data crystal. The architects didn't want anyone else accessing their secrets. The facility destroyed itself. The journey back to New Seoul took 3 days. Hayun spent every waking hour reviewing the data she had managed to save. Jiwoo worked beside her, running genetic analysis after genetic analysis. What they discovered changed with each passing hour, growing more incredible and more terrifying. The markers were in every human, every single one. They had been carefully woven into the genetic code, hidden in what scientists had always called junk DNA. But it wasn't junk. It was a program waiting to activate. These markers control healing, Jiwoo explained, his voice filled with wonder. They make human bodies repair damage faster than any other known species. And here, this sequence affects neural plasticity. It makes human brains incredibly adaptable. We learn faster, think more flexibly. What about this one? Hayun pointed to another sequence. Jiwoo went quiet. Endurance. Physical and mental. Humans can keep going long after other species would collapse. We can survive on less food, less water, less sleep. We can adapt to almost any environment. He looked up at her. Hayun, we're not just engineered. We're weaponized. The word hung in the air between them. Weaponized, created as weapons. But weapons against what? The archive had hinted at an enemy. Something that had threatened the architects themselves. But the details remained locked away, requiring access codes Hayun didn't have. When they arrived at New Seoul, they found the planet under surveillance. Unknown ships watched from high orbit. The Galactic Union had called an emergency session. All member species were required to attend. The topic, humanity. Ambassador Sung Ho met them at the spaceport. He was 58 years old, gray-haired and diplomatic to his core. But even he looked shaken. "The whole galaxy knows," he said without preamble. "I don't know how, but everyone knows about your discovery. They're calling humans a planted species, a biological weapon left behind by an extinct empire. What are they demanding?" Hayun asked. "Answers. Proof that humans aren't a threat. Some are calling for quarantine of all human worlds. Others want genetic testing. A few of the more aggressive species are suggesting immediate containment." Sung Ho's expression was grim. "They're afraid of us, Hayun. Terrified." The council chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from 200 species. Hayun stood in the center, feeling very small. Above her, the council members watched from their designated platforms. Some were humanoid, others barely recognizable as living things. All of them were staring at her with varying degrees of fear and hostility. High Archon Crestal spoke first. The leader of the Varantis Empire was massive, covered in dark chitinous armor with compound eyes that reflected no mercy. 3 million years ago, the architects vanished. Now we discover they left behind a species designed for war, a species that has already demonstrated remarkable combat capabilities. Humans defeated a Varantis strike force with inferior numbers and technology. They should not have been able to do that. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. "We are not weapons," Hayun said, her voice amplified to fill the space. "We are people. Yes, the architects created us. Yes, they gave us certain advantages, but we choose what we do with those gifts. We have lived peacefully in the Galactic Union for 300 years. 300 years is nothing," another voice said. This came from Magistrate Velmora, leader of the Tethys Collective. The aquatic being floated in a tank of water, her translucent form shimmering. "Your entire recorded history is filled with warfare. You fought each other constantly before joining us. Perhaps that combat instinct is simply dormant, waiting to be triggered." "All species have violent histories," Hayun countered. "The Varantis Empire was built on conquest. The Tethys Collective fought a civil war that lasted centuries. We are not unique in having conflict in our past. But you are unique in your design," a new voice said. This one was different, older, carrying weight that made everyone fall silent. Scholar Ithanara had spoken. The Luminous were energy beings ancient beyond measure. Ithanara appeared as a floating form of light, constantly shifting and reforming. They rarely involved themselves in council politics. Their words carried the authority of eons. "We remember the architects," Ithanara said. "We watched them rise and fall. They created many species before humans. Each one was designed for a specific purpose. Each one either failed or rebelled. The architects kept trying, kept refining their work." The chamber was completely silent now. Humans were their final creation, their most successful one. You were made to be adaptable, resilient, creative. You were made to survive where others could not, to fight what others could not fight. Ithanara's light pulsed slowly. "The question is, what were you meant to fight?" Hayun felt something stir in her mind. The archive data, responding to the question. Images flashed through her consciousness. Darkness beyond the galaxy, something vast and hostile, something that had destroyed the architects despite all their power. "I don't know," she said honestly. "The archive showed me glimpses of an enemy, but nothing clear. The architects were afraid of something. They created us as a defense against it, but they never told us what it was. Then we are left with dangerous uncertainty," Crestal said. "A species designed for war with no clear purpose living among us. I propose immediate quarantine of all human worlds until this matter is resolved." The vote was called. Hayun watched as lights appeared above each council member indicating their choice. Green for opposition, red for support. The colors flickered and multiplied. The chamber filled with red. The quarantine took effect within hours. Varantis warships appeared around every human colony world, blocking all traffic in and out. No ships could leave. No ships could enter. Humanity was sealed away from the galaxy, treated like a dangerous infection that needed to be contained. Taejin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Spirit, watching the blockade ships on his screens. There were 12 of them just around New Sol. Massive vessels, each one capable of destroying his ship with a single volley. He had fought Varantis forces before, in small border skirmishes. He knew their tactics, their weaknesses. But this was different. This was overwhelming force. "Captain," Bora said from her station, "I'm receiving reports from the other colonies. Same situation everywhere. The Varantis have us completely locked down. How long can we hold out? Taejin asked. Depends on what you mean by holdout. We have enough supplies for months. But if they decide to attack instead of just blockade? She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. In her laboratory, Ha-Yun was experiencing changes. It had started small. Faster reflexes, sharper vision, the ability to go days without sleep and still feel alert. But now it was accelerating. When she touched the data crystal, information flowed into her mind faster than before. She could understand complex technical schematics at a glance. Her body felt different, stronger, more efficient. Jiwoo noticed it too. He had been monitoring both of their vital signs. The markers are activating, he said, showing her the scans. The stress of the situation is triggering them. Your body is changing, Ha-Yun, becoming what the architects designed it to be. Is it happening to everyone? To varying degrees. It seems to affect people differently based on their genetic makeup and environmental factors. But yes, humans everywhere are beginning to show enhanced capabilities. The galaxy picked the worst possible time to threaten us. They've triggered our defensive programming. The attack came 3 days later, not from the blockade ships but from a Varantis strike force that appeared suddenly at Frontier Station, the outermost human outpost. They must have thought it would be an easy target. A small station with minimal defenses, far from any support. They were wrong. The defenders numbered only 300. The attackers brought 3,000. In any normal engagement, it would have been a massacre. But this was not a normal engagement. The humans didn't fight the way the Vorantis expected. They didn't stand and hold positions. They didn't follow standard military doctrine. Instead, they adapted, improvised, used every advantage the station's environment provided. They turned life support systems into weapons, venting atmosphere to freeze attackers. They collapsed corridors behind them, forcing the enemy into kill zones. They hacked into Varantis combat suits and fed them false sensor data. Bora had been at Frontier Station when the attack began. She had been running tactical drills, trying to prepare for a war everyone knew was coming. Now she was living it. Team 3, collapse Section 7, she commanded over the communication network. Her voice was calm, precise. Around her, the battle raged. Weapons fire lit up the darkness. Screams echoed through the metal corridors. But she remained focused, seeing the entire battlefield in her mind like a chess game. The Varantis fought with brutal efficiency. But efficiency wasn't enough against creativity. Every time they adapted to one human tactic, the defenders switched to something new. It was exhausting, desperate work, but it was working. After 6 hours of combat, the Varantis began to retreat. They had taken heavy casualties. Their commanders couldn't understand what had happened. Superior numbers, superior equipment, superior training. They should have won in minutes. Instead, they had lost nearly half their forces to an enemy that refused to fight by any recognizable rules. News of the battle spread through the galaxy like fire. The species of the Galactic Union watched recordings of the fight, seeing humans do things that should not have been possible. A single human carrying 3 wounded comrades to safety while injured himself. A team of 5 holding off 50 attackers for over an hour. Tactics that made no sense but somehow worked. Some species were impressed. Most were terrified. In the council chamber, the debate grew more heated. Magistrate Velamora argued for caution. The Tethys Collective had always valued stability, peaceful solutions. But even she was wavering. They defended themselves, she said. What else should they have done when attacked? They should have lost, Crestal replied bluntly. That is the point. A force of 300 should not defeat 3,000. It violates every principle of warfare. These humans are not natural. They are weapons pretending to be people. Back on New Sol, Ha-Yun was diving deeper into the archive data. The more she understood, the more frightening it became. The architects hadn't just engineered humans for combat. They had designed them to learn from every fight, to improve with each challenge. Human DNA contained something like a biological computer, constantly processing experiences and making tiny improvements to physical and mental performance. That was why humans were so adaptable. That was why they could survive in almost any environment, learn almost any skill, overcome almost any obstacle. They were literally built to evolve in real time. But there was something else in the data, a deeper layer she hadn't accessed before. It required specific conditions to unlock, conditions the archive had been testing for. Recognition of an old pattern, an ancient threat. Ha-Yun was studying this locked section when the alarm started. Not station alarms. These were coming from deep space monitoring stations, automated systems that watched the dark spaces between galaxies. She pulled up the data, her enhanced mind processing the information faster than should have been possible. What she saw made her blood turn cold. Signals, multiple signals coming from the intergalactic void, not random noise. These had structure, purpose, and they matched patterns in the archive data. Patterns the architects had flagged with the highest level of warning, the enemy they had been designed to fight. It was real, and it was coming. Hayun reached for her communicator to contact the council, then hesitated. Would they even believe her? Would they see this as another human trick? Another reason to fear them? The decision was taken from her hands when the first reports came in. Ships appearing at the edge of explored space. Not Varantis. Not any known species. Their technology was completely alien. Operating on principles that made no sense to galactic science, they attacked without warning, without negotiation. 3 systems went dark in the first hour. All communication ceased. When scout ships investigated, they found nothing. No debris, no survivors. Just empty space where vibrant worlds had been. The Galactic Union Council reconvened an emergency session. The blockade around human worlds suddenly seemed less important. There was a new threat now, one that made their fears about humanity look small by comparison. Ithanara spoke, the ancient being's voice heavy with old memories. They have returned, the enemy that destroyed the architects, the reason humans were created. The Lumeni scholar's light pulsed with something that might have been fear. Now we will learn if the architect's final creation is sufficient for the task. In her laboratory, Hayun felt the archive respond to the threat. The lock section opened. Information flooded into her mind. The true purpose of humanity, the weapon they were meant to be, and the terrible price of becoming it. The message from Magistrate Velmora arrived encrypted and marked urgent. Ambassador Sung Ho read it 3 times, hardly believing what he was seeing. The Tethys Collective wanted to meet with human representatives, privately, without informing the Council. It was a massive risk for Velmora. If the other species discovered she was working with humans, the collective could face severe consequences. But she had made her choice. They met in a neutral space station, one of the few places not yet touched by the spreading conflict. Velmora's water tank shimmered with internal light as she spoke. My people have analyzed the attacks. This enemy uses technology that disrupts the fundamental forces of nature. They can unmake matter itself. Against such power, conventional weapons are useless. Then how do we fight them? We don't. You do. The architects knew this enemy. They built you to counter it. We need to understand how Hayun joined the meeting by secure communication. She looked exhausted, having spent days studying the newly unlocked archive data, but her eyes were bright with understanding and something that looked like fear. The enemy calls themselves the Unmakers. They exist partially outside normal reality. That's why our technology can't touch them. They slip between dimensions. How did the architects fight them? They didn't, not successfully. The architects were pure technology, artificial intelligence in physical form. The Unmakers learned to corrupt their systems, turn their own weapons against them. That's why the architects lost. Sung Ho leaned forward. So they made us biological beings with technological capability. More than that, they made us unpredictable. The Unmakers work through patterns, through predictable systems. But human creativity, human adaptability, it cannot be predicted. We are chaos given form, living weapons that the Unmakers cannot understand or corrupt. The implications settled over them like a heavy blanket. There is a cost. To fully activate our capabilities to become what the architects designed requires a transformation. The genetic markers must fully express. It will change us fundamentally. Make us more than human, or perhaps less. I don't know which. Can it be reversed? Hayun shook her head. The archive isn't clear, but I don't think so. This is a one-way door. More systems fell to the Unmakers. The attacks were spreading faster now, as if the enemy had finished studying the galaxy and decided it was time to harvest. Billions died. Entire civilizations vanished in moments. The Varantis Empire, with all its military might, could barely slow the advance. High Archon Crestal had led his fleets personally into battle. They had achieved nothing. His ships were torn apart by forces that physics could not explain. He returned to the council chamber, his armor scorched, his pride shattered. We cannot win this war. Our weapons are meaningless. Our tactics are useless. We need an alternative. Everyone knew what alternative he meant. The one species in the galaxy that had been specifically designed to fight this enemy. The species they had been trying to contain just days ago. The council vote was different this time. Not about quarantine or containment. About survival. About accepting help from the very people they had feared and isolated. Hyun stood before them again, but now she was not alone. Jiwoo was with her, along with representatives from every human colony. They had come prepared with a proposal. A plan that would cost them everything but might save everyone. We need to activate the genetic programming in all humans. Not just combat personnel, but everyone. The transformation takes time, and we need as many of us as possible to complete it before the Unmakers reach the core systems. What will this transformation do? It will make us into what the architects intended. Perfect warriors against dimensional threats. We will be able to perceive and interact with the spaces between realities. We will become immune to the Unmakers' corruption, and we will be able to use architect technology that has been dormant for millions of years. And what will you become? Still human? Hyun met his compound eyes steadily. I do not know. The archive shows images of transformed humans from the architect's projections. They look like us, but different, enhanced, changed in ways I cannot fully predict. But they are our only chance. Your only chance. Velmora spoke, her voice carrying across the chamber. The Tethys Collective supports this action. We have studied the data Hyun provided. Her assessment is correct. Without this intervention, the galaxy will fall within months. Other voices joined hers. Species that had been enemies of humanity days ago now supported them. Fear had a way of creating strange alliances. Crestal was the last to vote. He stared at Hyun for a long moment, and she wondered what he was thinking. Was he imagining a future where transformed humans dominated the galaxy? Was he already regretting this choice? The Varantis Empire agrees. We will provide military support and resources. Do what you must. The transformation began immediately. Jiwoo had developed an activation protocol based on the archive data. It required precise genetic manipulation, something that would normally take years, but the archive had provided shortcuts, methods the architects had perfected over eons. Hyun was among the first volunteers. She lay in the transformation chamber, feeling the changes ripple through her body. It did not hurt exactly, but it was overwhelming. Every cell was being rewritten, optimized, enhanced. Her consciousness expanded, perceiving dimensions she had never known existed. When she emerged 3 days later, she was different. Still Hyun, but more. Her eyes could see into the spaces between realities. Her mind could process information at speeds that would have been impossible before. And when she reached out to the dormant architect technology, it responded to her touch like it had been waiting millions of years for this moment. Across human space, millions underwent the same transformation. Not all survived the process. Some bodies rejected the changes. But those who made it through emerged as something new, something the galaxy had never seen. The architect's final weapon awakened at last, and not a moment too soon. The Unmakers had reached the core systems. Their assault on the galactic civilization's heart was about to begin. The gateway was an ancient structure, built by the architects millions of years ago. It connected the galaxy to the spaces beyond, the dark regions where the Unmakers dwelled. For eons it had been sealed, protected by technology that even the most advanced species could not understand. Now the Unmakers had broken through. The combined galactic fleet assembled near the gateway, thousands of ships from hundreds of species, representing every military force in known space. It was the largest gathering of warships in galactic history, and everyone knew it would not be enough. Captain Taejin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Spirit, watching the fleet formations on his displays. His ship was small compared to the massive Varantis dreadnoughts or the elegant Tethys cruisers, but it held something none of those other vessels had: transformed humans. Bo-Ra was at her tactical station, her eyes glowing faintly with an inner light that had not been there before transformation. She could see the battle in ways that made conventional tactics obsolete. She could predict enemy movements by perceiving the ripples they made in dimensional space. All active human forces, prepare for synchronized engagement. Hyun's voice echoed in their minds, not through communicators, but through a direct mental link that the transformation had made possible. Transformed humans could share thoughts, coordinate perfectly. They had become a collective intelligence while still maintaining their individual identities. Ha-Yun herself was aboard a specially modified vessel near the gateway. Around her floated holographic displays showing data streams from the architect technology they had awakened. Ancient weapons systems were coming online across the galaxy, responding to the transformed humans who could finally operate them. The Unmakers emerged from the gateway like a dark tide. They were difficult to look at directly, existing in multiple dimensions at once. Their ships were not ships in any conventional sense, but living weapons that defied the laws of physics. They had destroyed the architects. They had ravaged countless galaxies, and now they were here. The conventional fleet opened fire first. Energy beams and missiles filled the space around the gateway. Most of the attacks passed harmlessly through the Unmaker vessels, unable to affect beings that existed partially outside reality. But some weapons found purchase, courtesy of the targeting data Ha-Yun and the other transformed humans were providing. They could see where the Unmakers were solid, where they could be hurt. The battle quickly descended into chaos. Unmaker weapons tore through conventional ships like they were made of paper. Entire squadrons vanished in flashes of impossible light. The galactic fleet was dying and dying fast now. Ha-Yun's mental command rang out. Activate the primary systems. Across the battlefield, architect weapons platforms that had been dormant for millions of years roared to life. But they did not fire conventional weapons. Instead, they began to manipulate reality itself, creating stable pockets of normal space-time that trapped the Unmakers, forcing them to become fully physical. And once they were physical, they could be killed. The transformed humans coordinated the attack with perfect precision. Every ship, every weapon, every tactical decision was synchronized through their shared mental network. They fought like a single organism with thousands of bodies, adapting instantly to every Unmaker countermove. Bora led a strike force directly into the heart of the Unmaker formation. Her enhanced perception allowed her to navigate spaces between dimensions, bringing her ships into positions that should have been impossible to reach. Behind her, human pilots followed with absolute trust, their own enhanced reflexes allowing them to survive maneuvers that would have killed them before transformation. Tae-Jin watched his tactical officer work with something close to awe. Bora was not just fighting the battle. She was dancing through it, turning combat into an art form. And the Unmakers could not predict her movements. Just as the architects had intended, human unpredictability was the key. The battle raged for hours. Ships burned. People died. But slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Unmakers were retreating, pulling back through the gateway. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered something they could not defeat, something they had not anticipated. Ha-Yun felt the moment of victory approaching, but she also felt something else, a choice that needed to be made. The architect systems were offering her an option. She could seal the gateway permanently, trapping the Unmakers on the other side. But to do so would require channeling an enormous amount of energy through her own transformed body. It would probably kill her. She did not hesitate. Through the mental link, she felt the support of every transformed human in the fleet. They understood what needed to be done, and they would carry on if she fell. Ha-Yun reached into the architect systems with her mind and became a conduit. Energy flowed through her in quantities that would have vaporized her old body instantly. But her transformed form held barely. She screamed, not from pain but from the sheer overwhelming force of what she was channeling. The gateway began to collapse. The Unmakers fled in panic, racing back to their own dimension. Those that did not make it through in time were caught in the closing portal and torn apart by conflicting dimensional forces. When it was over, the gateway was gone. Just empty space where an ancient threat had once existed. The surviving ships of the galactic fleet drifted in stunned silence, hardly believing what had happened. They had won. Against an enemy that had destroyed the architects themselves, they had won. Because of humanity. Because of what humans had become. Ha-Yun survived, though barely. Her transformed body had managed to endure what should have been impossible. Jiwoo found her unconscious in her ship, still alive, still breathing, still human in all the ways that mattered. The weeks following the battle were strange. The galactic species looked at transformed humans with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. They had been saved by the very people they had feared and tried to contain. Now those people were clearly more powerful than any other species in the galaxy. But the transformed humans made a choice. a choice that defined what humanity would become. We will not rule. Ambassador Sung Ho's words echoed through the council chamber. Though we have the power to dominate, we choose not to. The architects created us as weapons, but we decide what we do with that legacy. We choose to be guardians, not conquerors. The galactic species accepted this, though some remained wary. A new structure was formed. Humans would serve as protectors against dimensional threats, working alongside the Galactic Union rather than above it. The architect technology would be shared, studied, understood, but always with human oversight, because only humans could safely operate it. Most important of all, the quarantine of Earth was lifted. For the first time in 200 years, humans could return to their birth world. Ha-Yun was among the first to go back. She stood on soil that her ancestors had walked, breathing air that no human had breathed in centuries. The plague was gone, broken down by time and natural processes. The planet was healing itself, slowly reclaiming what humanity had abandoned. She knelt and pressed her hands into the earth. It was warm, alive, welcoming. This was where it had all begun, where the architects had found primitive apes and seen potential, where they had crafted their ultimate defense against the darkness between galaxies. Jiwoo stood beside her, also transformed, also changed, but still her friend. We can rebuild. We can bring life back to this world. Ha-Yun smiled. Yes, but not as we were, as we are now. We will build something new here. A future worthy of the sacrifice the architects made. A future worthy of what we have become. She reached into her pack and pulled out a small container. Inside were seeds from New Sol, her colony home. She dug a hole in the earth soil and planted the first one, covering it carefully, a symbol of new beginnings. Of two worlds, two humanities coming together. Above them, ships filled the sky. Human ships and alien ships working together to establish the first new settlement on Earth in 2 centuries. The transformation had changed humanity, but it had not destroyed what made them human. The compassion, the hope, the determination to build rather than destroy. The architects had designed humans as weapons. But weapons could choose to become tools, and tools could build wonders. Ha-Yun stood, brushing dirt from her hands, and looked toward the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors she had only seen in old photographs. Her enhanced eyes could see every shade, every subtle variation. Everything was more vivid now, more real. Somewhere in the archive data still stored in her mind, she knew there were more secrets. More knowledge the architects had left behind. But that could wait. For now, she just wanted to watch the sunset on Earth. She was Terra Prime, first bloodline, heir to an empire that had spanned galaxies. But she was also just Ha-Yun, a woman who had wanted to understand the past and had instead shaped the future. Behind her, the seed she had planted rested in Earth soil, waiting to grow. And around the galaxy, transformed and unchanged humans alike were beginning to build a new civilization. One that honored their designed purpose while transcending it. The DNA archive had marked her lineage, had revealed what humanity was created to be. But humanity itself would decide what it chose to become. And that choice, more than any genetic programming, was what truly made them human.